Who wants to hear about some ATM skimmers? All right. So I don't think this is going to be an actual talk. It's going to be Matt telling a story. So let's talk about skimmers. My name's Matt, by the way, Matt South. I work for Trust Foundry. It's America's #1 penetration testing security company. Pretty much this is a story of me finding an ATM skimmer in the wild in Bali, Indonesia. So I was in Bali on vacation with my wife, Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's kind of paranoid. There she is coming up here. That's me and Elizabeth. She, every time she types in her PIN number at an ATM,
scoot to that way a little bit.
She hides her PIN number with her right hand or with her left hand as she types it. And I told her she was tripping. I'm like, Elizabeth, you're crazy. You're paranoid. You don't need to worry about it. But little did I know that her advice would come in handy later down the road. So, does everyone here know what an ATM skimmer is? Have you guys ever heard of it? Okay, so a few people. If you haven't heard of what a skimmer is, read Brian Krebs. He's an author who, he kind of specializes in ATM skimmers, among other things. But it's essentially a device that sits in front of your ATM and tries to read your card number. So that's the short version. They're after two things. Number one, they want your card number. And number two, they want your PIN number. And with those two pieces of information, they can steal money from your ATM. So how do they get your card number? Traditionally, they affix a device in front of the card reader. Here's a photo of like a piece of plastic that sits in front of the card reader, and as you slide your card in, skims the number off the top. And so that's where the name comes from. They'll even replace whole panels of ATMs. I recently saw a picture of a guy who like put a laptop in front of like a screen and like made like a fake ATM that kind of sat in front of the ATM. So they're pretty clever about it. And they'll even do tiny inserts. There's a picture of a card skimmer that goes inside of the card reader. You need a special tool to pull it out. And lastly, they'll do card numbers over the wire. So they'll put some sort of wireless, like wireless access point or something like that to skim your card number over the wire. For PIN numbers, they usually just hide a camera. There's a tiny, you can't even see that hole, but it's a tiny pinhole camera that's in a piece of fake plastic with a camera built in. There's another one in like a card insert, something like that. Sometimes they use pin pad overlays where they put a pin pad over the top of another pin pad. Thank you. And here's an example of a point of sale machine with an entirely overlaid thing. Okay, so let's talk logistics. If you guys pretend for a second that you're criminals, right, and you want to steal people's PINs and their card numbers, what kind of stuff do you need to make this happen? I'll give you the first one. You need power. So usually it's a battery. You can't have like you can't plug this thing into a wall outlet, right? So you need to power this thing somehow. Usually it's a battery. What else do you guys need if you want to steal card numbers? Anyone? Storage. Booyah. That's right. Oftentimes it'll be like an SD card. You'd have to be crazy to use a hard drive or something like that. What else?
A reader.
Yeah, a retrieval mechanism. So that's something like they'll use Bluetooth sometimes, the sophisticated ones. They'll use cellular, wireless, or even like using a cable to hook up to it and pull the data off. So how do you protect yourself? Well, turns out Elizabeth was right. You cover your PIN number so that cameras can't read you, although that won't really protect against like the pin pad overlays I showed you. but it's so easy to do. Just cover your pin. It's easy, right? Like, why wouldn't you? Secondly, you jiggle. So don't get out the crowbar. Don't like pry pieces off of it. Just kind of wiggle. Usually they're attached with like light adhesive, or like they'll clip on. So you just kind of wiggle stuff. And that leads us to how I found the skimmer in the wild. When me and Elizabeth were in Bali, we've used this ATM before. That's a terrible picture, but there's a bank of ATMs there on the left, and a big tourist grocery store on the right. It's enclosed, so little scared tourists like us feel safe in this tiny little room. It's got air conditioning, which is kind of like a luxury, and it's off the street, so people can't see you pocketing cash. This is what the ATM looked like. It looks like a normal ATM, but just a little jiggling, and that's not supposed to happen. The whole hand canopy came off. I looked at it very quickly. I identified that it was a skimmer, because see that little port on the bottom, and there's a little switch on the right. Why does an ATM need that? Like the hand canopy, the piece of plastic that hides your PIN number, it doesn't need that stuff. Also, I couldn't get a picture, but in the night you could see like a faint blue light in there. So like this thing was powered. I thought it was a skimmer immediately. So what do we do with this? So we could leave it alone. Because it's not mine. This is a piece of a bank's ATM that came off. Like I can't just claim it. So, but then people get hacked, right? And that ain't cool. Like I don't want people to get their stuff stolen. So that wasn't an option. We could call the cops. But in Indonesia, cops are notoriously corrupt. Sorry if there's any Indonesians in the crowd. But they'll pull you over and shake you down and say, you broke a law, give me $100 or I'll take you to jail, that kind of stuff. I did not want to get involved in that. So that left us with, we decided to take it home and call the bank. So we talk excitedly. We knew we had a skimmer. We're going to take it home. We're gonna take it apart. We're like, what's inside of it? Like, what does it do? Like maybe who put it there? Is it organized crime? Like does it read a card number? Is it a camera? Like, we don't know what it is. Like, we've got all these questions. We're very excited. We said, we feel like we're in a movie. Like, oh man, like maybe there's mobsters, maybe there's criminals, maybe it's a conspiracy. But then we got to this part of the movie. Oh shit. Sorry for cussing. What if the guys who put it there want it back? And so Elizabeth was asking me, hey Matt, does this have a GPS on it? Does it have like a LoJax or something? Like, can they find us? And I said, babe, I don't know. Like, until I get it home and take it apart, I don't know what's in it. And she says, well, once you get it home, they know where our home is. So like, we were at kind of a catch-22. We decided to compromise. I asked the waiter to bring over some tinfoil, and we wrapped the son-of-a-bitch in some tinfoil. And so that kind of chilled her out enough to where I could take it home and take it apart. And so I woke up the next day. I wasn't shot. I wasn't dead. And I called the bank, and the customer service guy was very confused. He's like, do what now? And I'm like, I didn't want to let him know I'm a hacker and I know exactly what this is, but I also wanted him to go investigate what was going on. So I'm like, a piece of plastic came off the ATM and I don't know what's going on. And they're like, what? What's going on? And I'm like, eventually they're like, we'll send a technician. I'm like, good, just send a technician, check this ATM out. And I could not wait to take this thing apart. So the first thing I got to was that port on the bottom. Here's kind of a close-up of the port. So there's 4 wires. Any computer nerds, like if you see 4 wires, what are you thinking? USB. USB, booyah. So that's the first thing I thought. I was like, USB. Yeah. Well, I didn't have my lab, no soldering iron, no nothing, so we had to go low tech, MacGyver style. I took my cell phone charger and I cut it off, and I got 4 wires out of it. And then, so what order do you put them in? I had to kind of guess. I found this image online of black, green, white, red. And I had to thread it like one at a time, and I had to hold it with my right hand. It was a pain. I finally got it wired up, but I had to I didn't have solder or tape or anything. I had to keep it held, and I plugged it into my computer. It mounted as a hard drive. I was so excited. I almost peed a little. I called Alex. I was like, oh, I got this thing mounted. There's video files on it. Oh, I was freaking out. But I had to do it all left-handed because I was holding this thing with my right hand. It was complicated. So inside of this hard drive, when it mounted, there were 2 folders. One that said Google Drive, that I think was an accident. It was empty. And one that said DCIM. In the DCIM folder, there were 11 gigabytes of little 30-minute video clips.
30 minutes?
Yeah, they're motion activated, so it started recording whenever it saw motion. The date timestamp was jacked up, so I couldn't get any information off of that. And here's the files. So most of the files were just this. So people using the ATM, it's upside down, but I imagine the criminal could pause it and hold it. You can't hear it either, but there's sound. So whenever you hear a card go in, you hear like chick, 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 and then you hear the buttons pressed. So it's like bing, 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 bing as they hit each button. And then when a PIN number is legitimate, you hear the cash dispense. So the audio kind of plays a role in figuring out what buttons are pressed and stuff. Here's a little clip of the guy installing it. You can't really, the video quality is kind of crappy. But I looked to see, I tried to play detective, does he have tattoos? What ethnicity is he? Do you see his face? But you can't see anything. You see the side of this guy's left hand, and then you see it, he eventually puts it on the thing and it goes upside down. The most exciting file was probably me and Elizabeth discovering it. So the last file on the folder was me, and it's kind of like, oh shit, oh that came off. There's my wife Elizabeth. What the hell? And there's 30 minutes of us, you can hear us, it's in her purse, and I'm like, oh, what if organized crime? You hear the whole story. It's kind of funny. This is a quote almost directly. Elizabeth, I was like, well, I think it's a skimmer. What should I do? Elizabeth says, take it. Alex would be so excited to hear we found a skimmer. So how is this thing made? Okay, so this is the picture of the canopy when I got it home. And this kind of describes the cutaway. So your hand goes in, you type a PIN number. What they've done is they added some sculpting material, and they put some electronics in that little black box. And then up on the top is where the camera is, the pinhole camera. So I had to get out the chisel. That's the skimmer. That's me kind of breaking it apart. So the outside is an injection molded plastic, so it's like a commercial actual thing. And then I kind of broke apart all that yellow stuff is the sculpting material. There's a Samsung battery in there. You can see like a board in there. That's where I dug down to the camera. And there's a picture of the pinhole camera. And so what is this board? This is a modified spy camera board. You can see that little switch is the switch you saw on the bottom. So he soldered lines to it and put a switch on the bottom, and then moved the USB port and put a 32 gigabyte chip on there. It's an 808 micro camera board, and when I Googled it, I found a bunch of spy camera stuff. So he just bought a commercial spy camera thing, took it apart, modified it, and put it into a thing, like a hood. Okay, so final thoughts. The overall design choices were actually pretty decent. I thought he was kind of being lazy using the recording the sound, but actually it kind of helps when they're moving their hands over the buttons, hearing which buttons are dinging. So sound was a good choice. Cell phone battery, I pictured this guy just had a battery lying around and he used it. But if you're talking high power for a long time in a small profile, cell phone battery is the perfect choice. And then using a pre-made spy camera board had a lot of advantages. It's small, it's motion activated, it's got a little pinhole camera already, so it's like, and those things were 15 bucks. I also thought that the device was handmade, not mass produced. And you have to hook up a USB thing to get the data off and recharge the batteries and all that. So I suspected that this guy had a few of them and he would go swap them, you know? So I visited the ATM a couple days later, and there was another one there. I poked in real quick and took a snapshot and ran away like a scared little sissy, because I was still scared of the motorcycle guy shooting me in the face. So the bank had my phone number and stuff. They never called back. They never investigated this. I kept it around for the entire trip and threw it away like on the way to the airport because I didn't want to fly internationally with this thing. The card, what about the card number? So my suspicion, I jiggled really hard on the card reader and I didn't find any skimmer on the card reader. I suspected they were doing the over-the-wire skimming. And if you look at this picture, you probably can't see, but there's the power wire for the ATM, and then there's some extra junk over there. There's like 3 wires where I would only expect to be 1. So I thought they were doing some over-the-wire stuff. And then a few weeks later, I read a news article about a guy who was arrested 20 minutes away from where I found this skimmer. He was a Bulgarian man. They said he was using a canopy, hidden camera in the canopy, sound familiar? And he was skimming ATM or credit card numbers over the wire using a wireless device, sound familiar? So I'm pretty sure that's what he was doing. That's it. If I missed anything, I kind of tried to blow through that. Anyone have any questions? Hit me.
How long before you think he was right behind you to replace it?
How long? The question was how long before he was right behind me before I replaced it. So I took it home, went to bed, woke up the next day, took it apart, and then the day after I replaced it, and the timestamps were messed up on it, so I don't know if it was there for 5 days or 1 day, but I was estimating with the cell phone battery, I think he probably had to swap them about every 3 days, like give or take. So, anyone else?
Did you test the data files to find out if any of the numbers skimmed were accurate?
The question was, did I test the data file to see if any of the numbers were accurate? And no, I didn't steal any money. No Indonesian currency for me.
How did you find that article?
I wrote up a blog post about it, and someone linked it to me on my blog post. So someone sent it to me. Did I dust the inside for prints? No. Again, I was MacGyver at the moment. I didn't have my fingerprint testing kit and access to the federal database that I normally have. All right, thank you guys for listening.